All right, if you like coverage of 49ers strategy, you will be in heaven over the next 48 hours. Preseason is over. Roster cut down is coming at 1 o'clock. There's a lot of interesting stuff last night as far as last cases made to make this initial 53-man roster. There was one play that truly stood out to me involving some of the young guys, including the Hulk, Sebastian Valdez, and another guy who looks like the Hulk. I think Nick Martin. He is built, but it was Valdez. It was Evan Anderson, the second-year defensive tackle, and they just collapsed the pocket, pushed the interior line of the Los Angeles Chargers backwards, and it was a dream for Robert Saleh because he likes to free room up for his very athletic linebackers to just be missiles and make plays. Nick Martin saw his opportunity, barreled in, and made the contact that forced a fumble. It was teamwork amongst a trio of 49ers young players. Nick Martin's obviously going to make this roster, third-round draft pick. I mean, you look at the emoji, the stock-up emoji, that's what he's been all about so far over the course of this preseason. But somebody like Sebastian Valdez, that's much more of a bubble player, right? But with the stuff that we saw from him this preseason and then that dominance together with Evan Anderson yesterday against the Chargers, it's going to be tough to keep somebody like Sebastian Valdez off of at least the practice squad, which basically serves as a taxi squad these days. The 49ers just want to make sure that they can keep some of these promising young guys in the building and developing. But have a listen to Nick Martin. I asked him about that very play and the defensive tackles in front of him.
Fumble, it seemed that your two tackles, Valdez and Evan Anderson, we got a lot of push on that play.
Yeah.
As a linebacker, do you feel that?
Oh, yeah.
That you have that room to accelerate?
Yeah, no, you definitely feel it. You know, it's, you don't got linemen climbing up to it. You can really see and diagnose the play. So, man, them guys are balling. Everybody, that whole front is balling. And I'm super, super excited to play behind them and see them eat as well.
So we go back to how Robert Saleh built this thing in 2017 to 2020. That was his first stint with the 49ers. And it was all about defensive tackles who could really occupy blockers, move blockers, but just dominate space on the interior so that there would be room for the most athletic linebackers in the league to flow. And as we saw on that play that I'm talking about, that was a flow play for Nick Martin. Now, zooming out, big picture, Nick Martin, that was a real football IQ litmus test over the course of this preseason. People who jumped out and said Nick Martin isn't any good after week one, it's really been highlighted that they didn't know what they were talking about, given how much he improved from week one to week three. I thought that the first time that we saw Nick on the field against the Chargers, against the Broncos, I thought it was very, very clear that this was a player who just needed time, needed seasoning time, needed to understand angles at the NFL level, needed to reprogram his brain for NFL speed. But he clearly had speed of his own and athleticism of his own to be a force at this level. And it took just 2 weeks to, I think, for even casual observers to really understand that this guy is on the right trajectory. Is he going to start for the 49ers? Not early in 2025. Is he going to start by the end of 2025? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think that it serves any productive purpose to put any timeline expectations on this. They've got a lot of talent in the linebacker room. They have their 3 guys at the top right now. They have Tatum Bethune knocking on the door of that third spot as well. Nick Martin can easily ride on this roster as the number 5 linebacker, and Curtis Robinson can be the number 6, or you can invert the order because Robinson obviously has a little bit more polish as a veteran, but you've got a really strong linebacker room. And that's really important for a young defense that's going to be replacing a ton of its defensive linemen. And it also has seen quite a bit of movement in the secondary. But if that linebacker room in the middle, those are the guys that are delivering some of the stuff the defensive linemen have to deliver, and they're also covering. So they're right in the middle of that defense. It's been the key for Robert Saleh ever since he was with this team for the first go round. If that linebacker crew is explosive, if it's athletic, if it's deep, this defense has a shot to do what it needs to do for the 49ers. And I think that an upper half defense for San Francisco this year makes them true Super Bowl contenders. I don't think they need to be a top 10 or a top 5 defense. I think moving into the upper half this year, so 16 or better, combined with the offense that they should have with Brock Purdy and company, I think that's what gives the 49ers a true shot to win it all. I don't think that the roster as a whole is as complete and finished as it had been in recent years, but obviously they aged out last year. They got injured out last year in 2024, so they had to hit the reset button and get younger, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So when I review this game and when I start taking a look at what they might do at the cut down at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm viewing it through that lens of youth and development. I think there's a lot of question about a guy like Jordan Elliott on this 49ers team, veteran defensive tackle who started the game yesterday, had a couple pressures and only 9 pass rushing snaps, but he's one of the older veterans on this defensive line. Is it Sebastian Valdez versus Jordan Elliott for a spot? Is Jordan Elliott traded for the 49ers? Mike seems to think that he's going to be traded. We've been talking about this a lot, or that the 49ers were showcasing him by giving him the start yesterday. I'm not as sure, because I think that they're trying to play a deft balance right now of having enough veterans on that defensive line versus just throwing the rookies all out to the wolves at once. I know that a lot of the moves in this offseason, letting go of Malik Collins, letting go of Leonard Floyd, letting go of Javon Hargrave, replacing those guys with rookies, did match the ethos of throwing rookies out to the wolves. But I think that the 49ers also said, okay, there's a limit at some point. We need to make sure some of these rookies can confidently integrate into the NFL level without too much of a shock. So I think that keeping some veterans probably in the 49ers' interest. But if there's an offer good enough out there, I think Sebastian Valdez has shown that he does deserve a chance to see what he can do in the regular season. They've given him progressively more difficult competition, too, at practice. The last couple of weeks, we saw some Sebastian Valdez work against the ones, and a lot of it has been because of attrition for the 49ers. A lot of it has, been necessitated action against the ones because they've been so thin along the defensive line. But you can only deliver the snaps that you're asked to deliver, right? And if you've given out that opportunity as an undrafted free agent and you keep on pushing interior linemen back, you keep on showcasing some of that strength. I mean, he's at 34 bench press reps coming out of college. So he's the Hulk is an apt nickname. If you keep on doing stuff like that, then you should keep on getting opportunities in this league. And that's what the 49ers need to figure out over the next few days. All right, so we're going to talk about some of this roster movement. Right now, up on the San Francisco Standard, I have the 53-man roster projection. I understand that much of the game last night might have bored you a little bit. It didn't exactly, like at the start of it bored me. I'll be honest, if you had to give me some truth serum. But beyond the start, I thought that it got a lot more exciting just because these guys are fighting for roster spots. These are young players. We're getting to see them and this NFL pressure cooker for the first time, and then the pressure's truly ratcheted up at this point with the roster cut down about 48 hours away. And guys were hungry, guys were making plays. There is no guarantee of, well, there probably is a guarantee of tomorrow for most of these guys. The 49ers are going to practice on Monday, but there's no guarantee of Wednesday, which is the first practice after the cut down. There's no guarantee for anything beyond that. There are practice squad spots open, and it's around the entire league is going to be this mad dash of musical chairs with about 1,200 guys getting cut around the entire NFL. So what I saw yesterday, and what I didn't mention in instant reaction, because sometimes it's really hard to get to everything right after, Chaz Surratt, 10 tackles for the 49ers, and early on, a nice blitz against Trey Lance. You guys remember that first incompletion from Trey? That was on the deeper pass, and he just airmailed his intended target first drive of the game. That was Robert Saleh dialing up a blitz, and we've seen Robert do a lot of that over the course of this preseason. Chaz Surratt is interesting because he played for Robert back with the New York Jets. I think he's on the outside of the linebacker picture for the 49ers right now, and the fact that he played the entire game yesterday might corroborate that theory. It's generally, when you look at the final preseason game, it's it's inversely, the 53-man roster chances are inversely correlated to the amount of playing time somebody gets in that final game. But Surratt was all over the place. He was flying around. He was trusted with blitzes. It seemed like they were really showcasing him yesterday. He was in on special teams. I thought that the blitz timing was good from Chaz Surratt. I thought that was the most active that he has looked over the course of this preseason. And I think that we absolutely have to remember that this is going to include a 17-man practice squad as well. And somebody like Chaz Surratt might be a perfect addition to that 49ers practice squad, especially given the final audition that he put on tape yesterday. Speaking of that, the 49ers pressure leader yesterday from the defensive line was Robert Beal Jr. And I haven't seen Robert Beal Jr. as active as he was yesterday. This is the 49ers roster projection. Let's take a look at what I have for the defensive line here. And let's talk about how Robert Beal Jr. might fit into this building moving forward, because you got really, really intriguing traits from him. This is a sub 4.5 40 at edge rusher. That doesn't, happen. That doesn't come along very often. Defensive line, here you go. We got our list of players who are going to make this 49ers team. I have Robert Beal Jr. as the first cut, but again, I also have Sebastian Valdez cut, and I'm not sure. So I have 9 defensive linemen on this projection. I think there's a really good chance the 49ers take 10. I think there's a really good chance Valdez has forced his way onto it. And I think there's a good chance that they want to keep Robert Beal Jr. in the building. Now, this is where it gets a little dicey. It's not black and white, right? They could cut a guy, trust that he'll be available after the waiver wire is settled, and bring him back to that practice squad and then dip into the best of both worlds. The 49ers know more than I do, because they've got scouts around the entire league. They've got people collecting intel, looking at all 31 other rosters and the backs of all 31 other rosters to see if those teams might have a need for somebody like Sebastian Valdez. And if it's determined that there's a good chance that he'll clear through and they can sign him onto their practice squad, then obviously that changes the 49ers thinking. So you're constantly playing, and it's a tough chess match, right? It's an uncertain game, but you're constantly playing this game where you're weighing the pros and cons of keeping a man on your 53-man roster. But I also have to say, on top of Sebastian Valdez, Robert Beal Jr. Should at least have a shot to make this for the 49ers, because what he brought yesterday with 5 tackles, he was very, very active. 5 pressures for Robert Beal Jr. That's more impressive than 5 tackles, but he was in on a lot of tackles as well in the run game. I thought that he was active. I thought that he was violent, and we know that he has burst. Robert Beal could be a nice addition. Somebody who the 49ers have been developing now for a couple years. 2023 was his first season. He was a 5th-round pick out of Georgia, had never really played in the 49ers scheme before, and was just known as a toolsy edge rusher, but not as a skilled one coming out of college. Sometimes it takes those guys a couple years. Maybe the light is coming on for Robert Beal Jr., but it's right now it's crunch time for sure. And the 49ers are going to have a tough decision to make there at the end of the defensive line room. As you could see on the projection here, it's obviously Bosa and Michael Williams at the top. You might have heard Trent Williams yesterday saying, I expect big things out of Michael. There's a lot of hype about Michael Williams. And it's funny because we haven't seen him now for a couple weeks because of the knee hyperextension. Both he and Upton Stout should be back at practice this week. And that might be the 2 most impressive 49ers rookies, right? Upton Stout and Michael Williams were getting the ravest reviews before they both were sidelined. Stout with the calf, Michael with the knee. Ever since, we've been talking a lot about Marquise Siegel, who might be in line to start for the 49ers. But I think, like, headliner-wise, it was Stout and it was Michael Williams for the early part of this training camp. And it has been important, and it remains important for the 49ers to get both of these guys back. Because, look, I have both of these guys slotted into potential starting roles for the 49ers. We're going to zoom in on the defensive side of the ball, but there's Michael, starting bookend of Nick Bosa, and here's Upton Stout. I have him as the starting nickelback. Another interesting thing, we were speaking about nickelback yesterday, Chase Lucas played for most of the game, and normally that's not a great sign for somebody making the 53-man roster, Did you guys notice where Chase Lucas was for basically the entire second half after he hadn't played there for the entire first half? The first preseason, the first 2 games, he was at nickelback exclusively. For the entire second half last night, the 49ers moved Chase to outside cornerback, which leads me to believe that they were given, one last hard audition look at Chase Lucas to see if he is worth potentially a 7th cornerback spot on this 53-man roster, which would be unusual. Normally you take 6. We've seen 6 at corner, 4 at safety for the 49ers in the past, but I think they can go 7 at corner this year. Obviously, you're going to be taking Lenore and Ronaldo Green. Those are your 2 starting corners. I had wondered about Upton Stout because it seemed that his return date had kept on getting pushed back, but Shanahan said this week should be the return for Upton Stout, so I'm not wondering as much anymore. I think he obviously takes a 53-man roster spot. Then Saran Neal very clearly takes a 53-man roster spot, that mainly for special teams, but he's like the George Odom of this team. So that's 4 corners. You're obviously going to take a backup outside cornerback. I tend to think the 49ers will take both of these guys, but maybe they won't. Maybe they can get one through to the practice squad. Dallas Flowers had the lead over Darrell Luter Jr. for most of this training camp. Luter had probably a better game than Dallas last night. They both did get beat downfield, but Luter actually did make a couple of breakup plays for the 49ers. Just given how important it is to maintain some sense of a floor at the outside cornerback position, 49ers know this better than most teams. I mean, you remember what happened in 2020 when they ran out of corners and had to bring in Brian Allen against the Miami Dolphins. It wasn't pretty in that empty stadium at Levi's, but I think that the importance of maintaining a floor at backup corner, because teams opposing offenses will mercilessly pick on a spot if you don't got an appropriate talent at that position. That might mean that both Flowers and Luter make it. And if that's the case, then Chase Lucas making this team would be number 7 of the cornerbacks. Now, maybe everything I'm saying is a moot point. Maybe they're picking between Flowers and Luter, and maybe they only select one of those 2 guys, and then Chase Lucas can fit in as cornerback number 6. And, that theory is definitely plausible and works in congruence with Chase playing outside cornerback for the second half of the game yesterday. If they're testing Chase out on the outside and they're confident with the way that he can play on the outside, maybe he could fill the role of backup outside cornerback as well. And in the interest of roster efficiency, when you need to really make sure that these numbers are doing work for you, that you don't have any extraneous players, maybe that's what the 49ers feel that they need to be sure that they're not taking roster spots from other places on this 53-man. Now, speaking of the competition at cornerback yesterday, one of the bad pieces of news coming out of the game was that Jacob Robinson broke his forearm. That was the really impressive rookie out of BYU, especially over the first half of camp. It seemed that every day I was saying, Jacob Robinson had a pass breakup today. Jacob Robinson had a pass breakup today. It just played on repeat because he was making plays. Fourth quarter, final preseason game, breaks his forearm. That's brutal. He was destined for at least the practice squad. And now the 49ers are likely going to have to place him on injured reserve and basically redshirt him for the 2025 season. It's tough, but that's just how the NFL goes sometimes. And we'll hear more from Kyle Shanahan on other injuries that might have come out of this game, but that was the most serious one initially reported following action on Saturday night. So that, the cornerback room is something that was fascinating to me throughout this entire preseason because of how they used Chase Lucas at that nickelback position. I talked to Chase in the locker room yesterday. Just fascinating stuff, talking about some of the blitzes that Robert Saleh set up for him. And then the chess match strategy that goes into it's kind of like this. It's the psychological warfare of the blitzer versus the opposing offense. And Chase was telling me against the Raiders, because the tape was already out on the Broncos game where he was blitzing like crazy and he forced the safety early on against the Broncos first team defense. the Raiders were ready for him to blitz on like every snap, but he was faking it for most of the game. But every single time that Chase Lucas would start like nudging up, creeping up to the line against the Raiders with that Broncos stuff on tape, he said that everybody on the Raiders side would just start yelling 26, 26, 26, slide over to 26. So they were paying maniacal attention to Chase Lucas. And that actually against the Raiders opened up the 49ers defensive linemen to get after the quarterback. And remember, they generated quite a bit of pressure in that second preseason game. So it just gives you a little bit bigger of a picture. It's not only about blitzing and getting pressure. It's about the threat of the blitz and how that might open up some of the defensive linemen. And, I told Chase, I said, I know that you've only been here for 2 years now. He came over from the Detroit Lions last year, but when Robert Saleh was first a defensive coordinator from 17 to 20, the 49ers did not blitz a whole lot. They were near the bottom of the league. And it kind of shocked Chase because he knows the Saleh that we've seen over the course of this preseason, right? Over the course of this preseason, Robert has been unleashing the hounds, so to speak, in these blitzes. And Chase Lucas was really the first guy who was being counted on in that preseason opener. And the reason is that the 49ers have a very, very different setup this year. They're going to have to be hungrier on defense than when they had one of the great defensive lines in NFL history back in 2019. Not to say that this defensive line won't mature into something really good for the 49ers, but you have to be realistic. You have to be objective. And I think Robert Saleh is being realistic with himself. I think the 49ers are saying, okay, this is a young defense. We've replaced over 40% of our snaps. We've got guys who are trying to make names for themselves in the NFL, like a Chase Lucas. We've got defensive linemen like Michael Williams, like Sebastian Valdez, who are trying to entrench themselves at this level. And it's not a D Ford, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa line. Yeah, you do have Nick Bosa. That's really, really valuable. But you have to entrench yourself first. You have to create confidence and create opportunities. And sometimes you're going to do that through the schematic avenue, through some of those blitzes. So fascinating things happening here over the course of this August. Now we get to see how the 49ers translate that into regular season play when they actually start game planning against some of these teams. Where's Saleh going to blitz? Where is he not going to blitz? The first recipients of his strategy will be the Seattle Seahawks, helmed by old friend Sam Darnold on September 7th. Do you guys know there were 8 punts in the first quarter of this game yesterday? I'm looking through some of the notes right now as we're going through 8 punts. My goodness, that was a brutal watch at the start. But then things sped up, and then then we saw the back of the roster competitions. And if you come in with the right expectations into the final preseason game, if that's the kind of stuff that you're watching, you're more likely to enjoy what's happening in front of you. And yeah, down the stretch. I mean, the whole Trey Lance thing was really boring last night, right? It was more about guys like Chaz Surratt, Sky Moore yesterday. Let's be really clear about Sky Moore. I think a lot of people just don't know how to parse the gray area and the nuance of the trade that the 49ers made. He's a punt returner and a kick returner first, as far as what is this guy good at? Is he going to contribute on offense? I think so, but they didn't trade for Sky Moore to be the X receiver. They traded for Sky Moore to be a gadget weapon. He's going to play a Ray McCloud kind of role, and I think that he could be really good at it for the 49ers. I think he's got the burst. I think that the football doesn't quite have to come every down to a guy like that for him to make a difference out on the field, because he can run a lot of clear-out routes. He can show off that 1-4-6, 10-yard split. He can catch some shorter screen passes, and he could take off with the ball in his hands. But the first punt return yesterday for Sky Moore really was illuminating to me, and pun intended here, because he went from the shade into the starkest sunshine on the field. We know how bad that sun at Levi Stadium can get. But in the late afternoon, he's looking straight up into the late afternoon South Bay sun. And he had no problem catching the punt. You know how hard that is? I think that, like, there's so much video game playing these days that people don't really appreciate how difficult it is to do something like catch a punt. Although watching yesterday's game should have underscored that. The Chargers muffed 2 punts, and then we saw Junior Bergen, the 49ers rookie, muff a punt. That was a really, really tough tough rep for Junior Bergen at the end of the game. I will say he had a nicer punt return rep earlier where he caught the ball on the bounce and he almost exploded out of the gate. There was a shoestring tackle there that stopped another big return for Junior Bergen. But he's very likely not going to make the 53-man roster. Sky Moore, obviously in position to do that. And just the fact that he was able to go from shade to sun and look as comfortable as he did catching that punt, 49ers fans should appreciate the value of that more than anybody. Like, people are going to get mad at me right now, but I'm going to invoke the name of Kyle Williams. I'm going to invoke, some bad memories from playoff games later than that. In 2023, the 49ers in the Super Bowl were unable to field a punt, and it led to the turnaround of that game. So some of the most painful moments in recent 49ers history have come because of the inability to execute on the punt return. And raising the floor is really important. That's why the 49ers took a chance in the draft on Junior Bergen, albeit a 7th-round pick. And that's why when they saw Sky Moore was available for basically nothing, for basically free, they're able to jump on that. This is a guy that's returned a punt in one of the most pressure-packed situations ever in the AFC Championship game. 29 yards in the AFC Championship game a couple years back, helped set up the game-winning field goal for the Chiefs to send them to the Super Bowl. All right, more notes from yesterday. I've talked about Lucas. I've talked about Darrell Luter Jr. and Robert Beal. There was a run play yesterday where both of those guys were swarming for a tackle. And that's when I said, you know what? Robert Beal, this is the most juice I've seen out of him. And, it could just be a late bloomer kind of situation for him because we know that he has the physical tools to really, really get after the quarterback. You're not going to see a guy running a 4.5, sub 4.5 from the edge at 250 or so pounds all too often, but that's what Robert Beal Jr. can do. And what you want to see is a little bit of fight, a little bit of technical know-how, some savvy to be able to get through blockers. The caveat yesterday is that you're not facing top competition. And that's why we always look at this third preseason game with a big grain of salt. But at the same time, we also appreciate the roster battles that are happening within it. The final tight end spot's going to be really interesting. Now, here, I don't know if they're going to carry 3 or 4. It's one of my big questions, and I talked about it on the 53-man roster projection up on the San Francisco Standard. But as you can see here, I've got 3. I've got Braden Willis, who recovered a fumble yesterday, but Jake Tonjes recovered the onside kick at the end of the game. Tonjes had I thought they both did some good things. Not only throughout the game yesterday, but throughout all of preseason. The 49ers in the past, more often than not, they've carried 4 tight ends on the 53. I don't know if they have that luxury this year. I really don't, because there's so much roster confusion and crowdedness elsewhere. For example, at the receiver room, we finally have a little bit more clarity, but we still don't know exactly how long Jordan Watkins is going to be out. They said about a month. That injury happened, 1 or 2 weeks ago. So maybe Jordan Watkins is back for the season opener against Seattle. Maybe he's back week 2, but maybe he's going to need a little bit more runway time. Again, that's murky. The Juwan Jennings situation is super murky. I mean, we could waste our time talking about social media posts right now, but we're not exactly sure what the meaning there is. That's all obfuscated right now. Yesterday, Kyle Shanahan said that health-wise, Juwan Jennings should be good for week 1. So that just it adds to the intrigue more than anything, right? Jennings, to me, it's a big domino because Russell Gage should be back. If Jennings is back and he's actually a contributor, then you got Pearsall, and you're not going to have Cowing because Cowing's done for 6 weeks right now. I think that Cowing actually fits as one of the 49ers' return from IR designations. They get 2 of those on Tuesday. So he doesn't have to take up a 53-man roster spot, but then he's going to have to miss at least the first 4 games of the season. Well, the regular season starts in 2 weeks. Cowing is on a 6-week schedule right now, at least 6 weeks. I think it just makes way too much sense. I think the 49ers definitely will go that route with Jacob Cowing. So he won't take up a roster spot. But what about Jennings? What about Watkins? If both of these guys do take up a roster spot, that's 1, 2. Pearsall is 3. Russell Gage is 4. Sky Moore is 5. Do you carry a 6th receiver, or are Hodgins and Chosen, both of whom made some catches yesterday, are both of those guys practice squad players who you flex up temporarily for the start of the season. So I think we have some more clarity, but we still don't have the full clarity. And the big hinge point for the 49ers at that receiver position is Jawan Jennings. Some people have been asking me about Jeff Wilson Jr., who's the 49ers leading rusher yesterday. Jeff, I think, is getting better with each passing day now in his second stint with the 49ers. But unless there's an injury at that running back position, I think that it's very obviously CMC, number one. Brian Robinson Jr. has been named the number 2 back. Kyle Shanahan did that yesterday. So we bumped Isaac Guerrero down to number 3. Jordan James is going to be back from the broken finger very soon. So he's going to be the 49ers' 4th running back. I mean, if it's a decision between Jordan James and Jeff Wilson Jr., I'm not saying that it is, but even if it were totally even between the two, you would take the rookie so you don't terminate the 4-year deal. You've got him under team control for 4 years. Jeff Wilson Jr., that's somebody you can cut and bring back to the practice squad much more easily without having to take any contractual damage. And then there's Keyshawn Vaughn, who if they need somebody to fill out the practice squad, then that's definitely a player they'll look to. But I think it's Wilson and Vaughn on the outside looking in. I mean, Wilson ran well yesterday. Shanahan said he's going to make it hard on them, but this just seems like a no-brainer for me. 4 backs, 1 fullback, 5-man room. That's what the 49ers have done in the past. That's what I would expect them to do again moving forward. Quarterback room, it was funny. I thought Tanner Mordecai played his ass off yesterday. That run, on the little fake zone read to the right, Kyle Shanahan was fired up as he ran by him out of bounds, picked up the first down. That run really showcased Tanner Mordecai's athleticism. Carter Bradley was playing gimpy essentially the whole game. Mordecai was playing gimpy at the end of the game. You salute both of those quarterbacks because they're the only 2 available ones for getting the 49ers through to the finish line. I actually thought they both made some nice throws. Mordecai, more of them. Mordecai was 10 of 13. Carter Bradley, then the one that he put on to Robbie Chosen, that Chosen kind of just plucked out of the air late in the game. That was a bullet. He also put one on Sky Moore early in the game that Moore couldn't hang on to. It was going to have to be kind of a little diving catch. You would have loved to see Sky make that play. I think it was a great illustration of Sky Moore ceiling of a gadget weapon at this point. That would have been an actual wide out catch. And you wanted to make it, I get it, but it was a reminder of what the 49ers brought Sky Moore in to be. And you probably, while these receivers are out, he's going to be in a more featured role than the gadget one that they expect him to be in. But my bigger point is that Carter Bradley actually did make a good throw there. I think that he looks a lot better than he did his first game with the 49ers. But I also, have to salute Tanner Mordecai because it's been a tough month for him. Cut twice, re-signed twice, back with the 49ers before this game. I guess Nate Sudfeld hurt his arm. They disclosed that on the telecast yesterday in his only practice upon returning to the 49ers. So Mordecai had to be on speed dial, and he's in a lot of ways, he's a gamer. I mean, there was a play that didn't count because of the flag yesterday, but he kind of spun out of what would have been a safety in the end zone, and he rolled right, and then he just threw the ball away. And it's just there is some real athletic juice with this guy. I just don't know if either of the 2 49ers backup quarterbacks showcased enough polish to be on the 53-man roster for San Francisco, especially when roster spots are so valuable. So, like right here, I've got how the 49ers have this set up at quarterback. And everything to the left is supposed to be 53-man projection, but I just didn't have room across the spreadsheet to fit Carter Bradley on the right side. So I make a note here and I said, not on the 53. And by that, I mean, I think they're going to carry 2 on the 53. And then they're obviously going to carry at least 1 on the practice squad. It'll be a matter of waiving both of these players if the 49ers do that, and then re-signing once the practice squad, because the ace in the hole that you have here is Curtis Rourke. He's on a non-football injury list, NFI, and that's actually really useful for the 49ers because it works the same way as injured reserve, but they don't have to use one of their IR designations. Now, the only way that you could put a guy on NFI or PUP is if you do so at the beginning of training camp, and he can't practice throughout training camp if he's still going to be on an NFI or PUP into the regular season. But Rourke is their 7th-round draftee, the quarterback out of Indiana. He's Canadian. They call him the he's the Maple Missile, right? Is that what they're calling Curtis Rourke? Yeah. He's got a Canadian nickname, and they think he's got a lot of ability. He's got to miss at least 4 games at the start of the season if he's transferred over to the regular season NFI, which everybody expects. And then we're going to start to talk about when can he return from the ACL. When he does, he might be able to be the 49ers number 3. The great thing about NFI for the 49ers is they don't have to redshirt Curtis Rourke for the entire season. If this were an IR situation, if he had played a little bit in training camp and then they had to put him on injured reserve, he wouldn't be eligible to return unless you used one of the 2 designations on him. But, I think the designations are going to go to Kevin Givens and to Jacob Cowing. So you have to be very, very wise, and you have to you can't be extravagant with the return from IR designation since you only get 2 of them. So somebody like Curtis Rourke, though, since he qualifies for the NFI list, you could essentially get a return capability for free because they've handled this in the way that they have handled it over the course of the first few months. And he might swoop in there at some point this year and become the 49ers QB3. But for now, they've got to carry either Carter Bradley or Tanner Mordecai or both on that 16 or 17-man practice squad to begin the season. And I say 17 because you have room for 1 international exception player, and that's going to be Isaac Alarcon, the tackle, wears number 67. You know who played really hard over the course of this preseason, and we need to mention him now because we're probably not going to be talking about him until around the time of September 28th, is DeMarcus Robinson. Robinson is a strong receiver, and he runs good routes, strong hands, and very, very willing to block. He put in a lot of high effort snaps over the course of this preseason, and I get why. He's going to be suspended in all likelihood for the first 3 games. So the 49ers probably won't see him back until late September. That's going to be against Jacksonville. So he had to put on some just good tape for the 49ers to be confident about him when he does return to the lineup. And yesterday, that was a great catch on the touchdown. But there was a play where there was a completion to the far side to Luke Farrell, the tight end 2 for San Francisco. And DeMarcus Robinson, if there was ever any question, is he going to fit into this scheme blocking wise? Does he have the dog in him that the 49ers demand that Kyle Shanahan is so specific about at the receiver position? I think 2 thumbs up. He's out there out on the boundary a good 8 to 12 yards downfield, hustling, blocking his ass off. And Luke Farrell, because of it, is able to get a first down. Realize how wide these fields are first, right? The field is 53 1/3 yards wide. So to get all the way out to the perimeter blocking, that's something. And then to be downfield blocking for a tight end in a preseason game when you're not going to be playing until September 28th. I think DeMarcus Robinson has handled this whole suspension really well. Like it could have been like, oh, well, I'm not going to play until week 4. So, maybe I should just kind of build up then. He has said, I'm going to try to get as many quality reps in now, build as much trust with my teammates as possible. There will be a layoff now of gameplay. You can still practice, but there'll be a layoff as far as games go. But he really made sure to sharpen his sword, so to speak, over the course of this preseason. And I thought that he was impressive yesterday. I do know, just listening to some of the people around the 49ers, they think he's going to be a integral part of this offense this year. He's coming off his best season, 500 receiving yards of the Rams. And one thing that has really struck us about DeMarcus Robinson, just watching him on the practice field, is his strength. He was a big dude, but you didn't realize how big he was with the Rams for whatever reason. Now it's very, very clear that DeMarcus Robinson, he has the frame to really be able to exact what the 49ers want physically out on the football field. Tough game yesterday for Drake Nugent, 49ers center. We didn't expect him to make this San Francisco roster. Gave up 3 pressures, including back-to-back plays, and there was one that turned into a sack fumble that the 49ers gave up. That was tough. But both 49ers backup centers. We saw Naquan Jones beat Matt Hennessy earlier in this game. And then later on, we saw Marlo Wax just just obliterate the gap there in between center and left guard. Went right in between Drake Nugent and Connor Colby. People aren't happy about this. I know Mike was like, oh no. When I told him this, I think it's going to be Nick Zakelj as the 49ers backup center on the 53-man roster. I think he's seen a little bit of a resurgence here toward the end of training camp and the preseason. I know that it wasn't trending in the right direction for him a little bit earlier, but if we want to take a look at what this 49ers offensive line room is going to look like in my projection, I can easily illustrate it for you right here. You've got middle of that line. Here's the starters. Williams, Barch, who should be back maybe even this week. Brendel, Dominic Pooney's feeling good. Bumped into him in the press box yesterday. I was like, man, I was scared of the way that you're walking after that Raiders game. He's like, I was too. He's kind of walking. It was gimpy for sure. Wasn't able to bend his knee, but he's walking a lot better now. There's an outside chance that Pooney's ready for week 1, so he's not going to have to be a return from IR guy, which is good news for the 49ers. How do you fill in for him in the short term? I think the 49ers would really love if Connor Colby made them comfortable enough to take over that right guard spot. I think the insurance there is Nick Zakelj, who actually has started some games for the 49ers. But the big thing here is that you need to have good backup capability for the really, really important positions like center, which is mentally, cerebrally extremely challenging. Zakelj can do that for you on the 53-man roster. Now Hennessy, he got beat yesterday by Naquan Jones. I think that he probably try to sneak him through to that practice squad. I don't know if, Hennessy gives you guard versatility as well, but I think that Zakelj's a better guard than Hennessy. And I think that Zakelj has the nod on the 53-man roster, and then Hennessy is on the practice squad. It could be the other way around, but this is the way that it seems to be trending just based on looking at the 49ers lineups at practice and over the course of preseason. Burford obviously makes it. He's been playing well for the 49ers at that backup left tackle position. And then, I'm just so torn about what they do at right tackle. And you'll see I've got 9 offensive linemen making this team. And it felt weird to me to have to put Austin Pleasance on the 53-man roster. But if Spencer Burford, if they're only comfortable with him backing up the left side, don't they have to have somebody on the 53 that could fill in case Colton McKivitz goes down mid-game on the right side? That's the way that I'm just trying to make this make sense in my head. But if McKivitz goes down and Pleasance is not on the team, then you're not having Connor Colby play right tackle. You're not having Nick Zakelj play right tackle. And I suppose you could say, okay, fine, Spencer, go try this. But he hadn't taken any reps at right tackle over the course of training camp. The backup, they haven't had a swing situation. So that's why I have Pleasance on the inside of this picture. I think that it's something that the 49ers might have to do. Now, the key to remember here is that the 49ers are going to be scouring the waiver wire, and they're going to be scouring the trade market. They're not done making moves yet. Let's put it that way. Not necessarily trades, but they're going to make moves. They are number 11 in the waiver claim order. This is the highest that they've been since following that 2020 season, so 2021. And that just is dependent on your record. And they went 6-11 last year. So teams are going to cut 1,200 players league-wide in that window on Tuesday. And that means that this is going to be so busy for the 49ers pro scouting department. They've got to look at everything that can potentially improve the back end of their roster. If they get lucky, there will be a capable swing tackle available somewhere, or capable backup tackle they think can upgrade the situation over Austin Pleasance. So it's really foolish to talk about anything in finality at the first cut on Tuesday, because the first cut, well, yes, the 49ers will trim those 37 players, but that is actually when all the fun begins, because then you're going to start adding again. You're going to have practice squad, and you're going to be taking guys off of waivers from other teams. So just because you made the first cut, say that Austin Pleasance makes the first cut for the 49ers on Tuesday, doesn't mean that he's safe on this roster through Wednesday. Because if there are linemen better than him available and the 49ers claim one of those linemen, then he'll get cut on Wednesday, right? So it's going to be a wild 24 to 48 hours from the time of the cut down at 1 p.m. to the time of waivers clearing the next day and the practice squads and the rest of the rosters being built out. But that's just one of the potential choke points of this 49ers roster that I've identified, that I'm looking at, that I'm wondering how they're going to proceed through. Now, speaking of the offensive line, somebody like Drew Moss has really impressed the 49ers this preseason. That's the guard out of Colorado State. The Jeff Wilson Jr. touchdown run, Drew cleared a lot of space. I think that his polish as a pass blocker still needs to come. He gave up some pressure over the course of this preseason. I can say that they really want him back on the practice squad. And, you know, if their pro scouting department has some intel that says, oh, Drew Moss is going to get picked up if we waive him, if that's what the 49ers are internally saying, then it is worth a discussion. Do you carry him on the 53-man roster? It's really, really hard to stretch the roster just one spot for an undrafted free agent who still has some developmental work to do. But I'm here saying that Drew Moss really impressed me with his tenacity. I mean, you'll see the perfect zone block, strength, speed, lateral agility. Then Jeff Wilson Jr. cut up field for that touchdown. Drew is strong. Drew is hungry. Drew is the guy that you want to keep in your building. But is it somebody that you can afford to keep in the building by any means available? Probably not. It's the reality of this league. These are capped rosters. It's not only salary cap, but the rosters are capped for size. And the 49ers are going to have to do some roster Tetris, some roster maneuvering. All I can say is that Drew Moss would be a fun guy to keep in that room to continue developing. So we'll see exactly what happens at the cut down. And, you know, maybe one way that you can make this work is you only carry 3 tight ends. You only carry 2 quarterbacks. And I think those are things that the 49ers might even be likely to do. Maybe you play some serious roster Tetris at receiver. Remember that DeMarcus Robinson is going to go on that suspended list, so he's not going to take up a roster spot for the first few weeks. You could gamble much more readily on veteran receivers like Isaiah Hodgins and Robbie Chosen. They're not exposed to waivers if you cut them. So I think the 49ers do a little bit of that, so then they could end up keeping some more waiver eligible rookie contract guys on the roster to protect them against poaching from the outside. The defensive line, you're going to have in all likelihood, an extra spot available because of Yetur Gross-Matos staying on PUP. That was one of the key developments from the end of the week. Kyle Shanahan said that Yetur's knee is not coming along as quickly as they had hoped. They're going to have a decision to make, but it sounds like they're leaning toward PUP, which will be 4 games at least of Yetur Gross-Matos not able to play, but also not counting against the 53-man roster because we haven't seen him yet throughout training camp. And that opens up a potential spot for somebody like Robert Beal Jr. Or, you know, you can't just look at it as a defensive line thing because the roster spots, I mean, this is an entire roster pool. So if Yetur is not taking up one of the spots, that's one of 53 spots that he's not taken up. And then you go back and you look at other players across this roster that might be able to squeeze into the resulting opening for the 49ers. Then there's linebacker. You know, I mentioned Chaz Surratt looking like, you know, I mean, he was playing well yesterday with those 10 tackles. They trusted him on blitzes. I think that the practice squad more likely. I thought Jalen Graham had a nice game for the 49ers too. Practice squad more likely for Graham. I think these are your 6. And I think that Curtis Robinson was one of the great stories coming out of the game yesterday. I talked to Curtis in the locker room, and I know that I have the intel video from the locker room out. You guys can go ahead and check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Maybe I play that one from here toward the end of this show. But Curtis was so his parents were sitting behind the 49ers bench, and he tore his ACL on September 27th of last year. And I still remember us talking about Curtis Robinson being a potential breakout player for the 49ers frequently last year. Had a really good camp, started the season well, was working his way up that pecking order. I mean, you might not ever get into that Devondre Campbell mess if Curtis Robinson is a little luckier with his ACL, but unfortunately he tore it and it set him back, obviously. And he told me the last 11 months have felt a lot longer than 11 months. And he just kept his head down. And he said when he caught that pass yesterday, the interception, and he started sprinting back and he scored the touchdown, he just looked toward the 49ers sideline and he's jogging back. And it's all the brothers that had helped support him to get through. You know how hard it is to rehab, but the margins in this league are so tiny, guys. If you're running a split second slower, you're going to get surpassed by 1,000 other guys who want to play the position. Like, this is a brutal sport. These guys are, if you're not a star player with an established multi-million-dollar contract, it isn't. I mean, it's not easy for those guys. They had to get to their position as well. But even for those guys, there's somebody gunning for their spots. But to stay employed at this level, it is so difficult. So then when you suffer one of these injuries, one of these ligament tears, ACL tear, I mean, you're going through the ringer. Somebody like Curtis Robinson. And he had his brothers supporting him for the past 11 months. He has a pick 6 in this game, and he's running back to the sideline, and he sees those guys who were supporting him fired up for him. I thought that was just a cool moment. That's why they play. You could say I'm waiting for September 7th all you want, and I am too. Don't get me wrong. There's nobody more excited about the start of the regular season than me. But I'm paying attention to moments like the one that we saw yesterday from Curtis Robinson. And I think he's going to be one of the 49ers 6 linebackers to make this team. Warner, Winters, Gifford. Now, Bethune was out yesterday with some soreness. I thought that he's making a nice move for that number 3 spot. Nick Martin, awesome game. And I think that we're going to hear from him in one of the top 3 spots sooner rather than later. It's not going to be immediately. I think that this is going to be a developmental type of year for Nick Martin, but he's got a lot of physical ability, and it's really showing up now. And then Curtis Robinson could be one of the 49ers core 4 special teamers. That's what we have to remember, is that Brant Boyer is going to have quite a bit of input on this roster. If you're looking at okay, how do the 49ers make the playoffs this year? All right. Just think of that when you're thinking about constructing this roster. Think about it in terms of phase efficiency, offense, defense, special teams. I've been very vocal about saying the 49ers are gunning to be a top 7 offense this year. That you saw it with the Brian Robinson Jr. trade. The receiver room needs to get a little bit healthier, but they think they're going to have some robust depth there once guys are back, and maybe that's going to happen sooner rather than later for the 49ers. And, Brock Purdy is one of the best in the game. So, okay, offense, I think the table is set there for the offense to have a nice year for the 49ers. The receiver problems are noted, but they're going to have to work through them, and it's a lot easier to work through problems like that when you've got Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle on your football team working with Brock Purdy. All right, that's all great. So what do the 49ers do elsewhere? Defensively, I think I keep on harping on they've got to be at least a top 20 unit, at least. If the offense is top 5, you can work with something in the top 20s to get yourself into position playoff-wise, and then that defense can be opportunistic and it can improve over the course of the playoffs. I look at the Rams model for last year, right? They were like number 29 defensively over the first 3 months, and then they were number 5 over the last 2. So you could do something similar if you're the 49ers. That's acceptable. Would you like it to be better? Would you like to be in the top half all season? Sure. Might Robert Saleh be able to do that with Bosa and Warner there? Maybe. But I'm objective. I'm realistic. So I'm going to say top 20 is a more probably achieved goal for the 49ers early in the season. Now, even if you do both of those things, you absolutely cannot have special teams screw it up. Special teams screwed up so much last year. It screwed up a lot over the course of many years for the 49ers. You just can't have it. You absolutely can't have it, which is why they brought in Brant Boyer, which is why they've changed 2/3 of the kicking operation. I know a lot of people are going to start talking about Jake Moody in the chat right now, but you bigger picture special teams is that every phase of this failed in some way for the 49ers in 2024. That's why they're ranked at the bottom of the league. So you bring in Brant Boyer to fix this unit, you're going to give him some real roster leeway at the cut down. So somebody like Curtis Robinson, who's been playing really well on special teams, he one of your core 4, he makes this team, right? You keep him in the building. Brant Boyer needs somebody like Curtis Robinson. Somebody like Saron Neal had the first kickoff return tackle for the 49ers yesterday. He's the new George Odom for the 49ers. That's somebody who takes up a roster spot for San Francisco. So teams, special teams, we just abbreviated the teams. That's something that we're going to be considering very, very closely as the 49ers move to make this roster cut down on Tuesday. And in summary, I think if the special teams is an upper half unit and the defense is a top 20 unit and the offense is a top 5 unit, the 49ers are set up for success. Anything beyond that, okay, now they're moving closer and closer to true Super Bowl contention, not just playoff contention. But anybody who follows the NFL should realize that the goal at the start of every year, when you don't have an absolutely stacked super team of veterans, is to make the playoffs. You make the playoffs, and then your team evolves over the course of the year, and you figure out what's next beyond that, and you see where your team is health-wise, and you see where it's at developmentally 4 months from now. But this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You don't go out there week 1 against Seattle and say, we're going to win the Super Bowl today. You out there saying, we need to beat Seattle today, and then you have a game the next week against the New Orleans Saints, and you build over the course of the season. And that's what the 49ers want to build to as far as efficiency for each phase of the game. Boy, I'm just information is flowing out of me today. I know, because I got all these notes. I was watching tape this morning. Marquise Siegel and Jair Brown. I still can't figure out who exactly was beaten for that TD. I know technically they both were beaten, but I can't figure out who was more at fault in that one situation. Terique Owens, I promised I'd talk about him. Terique is not going to make the 53. Let's be honest with ourselves. I get asked about Terique a lot, but it was just such a feel-good moment yesterday. And there's a good chance he's back on the practice squad for the 49ers for the 49ers in 2 days. 3 days. Wednesday would be practice squad day. This is a very raw player who's been making incremental progress, but progress is progress. He last year was not catching passes in games. He's not catching touchdowns in preseason games. This year it's been happening. He still has some drop issues at practice. They're not nearly as bad as they were his first year. Somebody who came from playing college basketball to transitioning to football late. I mean, that's a tough transition to make. You see Mason Pline, the tight end, he's with the Saints now, and was with the 49ers, and they cut him. It's a transition that he wasn't able to make quickly enough. So if they believe in the developmental trajectory of Terique Owens, he might be back on the practice squad if they feel that they have a spot to do that. But he's not going to be on the 53. That's obvious from what we've seen. I've reported on some of the big go ball catches he's made at one-on-ones, and I think that's what really has flashed so far for the 49ers. As far as route running nuance and catchability, still something that needs work for Terique Owens. Still something that needs a higher floor before he has a chance of making a 53-man roster in this league. Wow. 58 minutes of me just talking. Owens was nice to hear yesterday. It was really cool. I told you guys I was in the elevator with Frank Gore, and we were, the elevator has a TV at Levi's, and so I was watching that with Frank Gore. He's like, "That's T.O.'s son." He was able to identify it right away. He saw the 83 on that little small screen in the elevator. I just thought that was a really cool moment for Terique Owens at the end of practice yesterday. I am waiting for some good questions here. Let's get this up over 1,000. I know it's still preseason, so I don't expect the biggest numbers, but screw it. We're over 800. Text this to all your friends right now. At least over 900. I'll answer some of your good questions, but literally take this stream. You can hit the share button, text it to your group chat, and say, "Hey, Lombardi's going to answer your questions if this goes over 100 or 900, and it better be over 100. It's at 8:30. I would like to see this go over 900 at least. That would be fun. Pooney is, I mean, he's shooting for week 1, but nobody's sure about that. I think it might be a little bit longer. I think it's definitely trending in the right direction. Are we at 91K yet, Mike? That'd be fun. We got to 91K. I'm looking. I could tell on my phone. If it loads, seems that my phone is not wanting to join the Wi-Fi right now. Reception not good enough. But yeah, anyway, hit that sub button, hit the alarm bell, do all that good stuff. $28 subs to go for 91K. We got somebody playing the live video on his phone and his laptop. Yeah, an hour in, it's hard to like boost the count, but in the 800s that's kind of cool. I didn't expect that many of you to take your time away on this Sunday to watch, but you did. And those of you who need to watch later will be watching later, and it's all going to be good. You know what you should do is head on over to the San Francisco Standard. Link is in the description. My 53-man roster projection is there. It's available. It's ready for you. So go ahead and check it out. I think this is what you have to read at this point. This came out during the game yesterday. Then I made some tweaks based on the locker room intel. So go read the 53-man roster projection. This is the must for you. It's about time that all of you signed up for the San Francisco Standard. So the link right now, I'm going to toss it into the description, and I think it's already in the description, but I'm tossing it in the comment section, and it's something that you can just click on there. Who will start next to Pinnock at safety? Maybe Marquise Siegel. Actually, I think that seems to be trending in that direction. And then Malik Mustafa, he's a star when he comes back, but I would think that he misses at least the first 4 games of the season. Got a chance to say hi to both Jim Harbaugh and Navarro Bowman. That was one of the cool things about yesterday. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. We will talk to you very soon.